So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully this is something that you'll find of interest. So without further ado, just to introduce ourselves. So I'm John Fisher, last on the list that you can see there, but I'm joined by my colleague Paul Charles, who's our head of professional services here at KT Secure, and also Paul Smith, who's pre-sales engineer at macmon, and so macmon and KT Secure working together to really talk about this, the whole concept of avoiding disaster with advanced network security, and really it's about NAC solutions in general, which is something that macmon are very instrumental in. So in terms of what we're going to talk today about briefly is this. So really it's more of a bit of a chat around some of the experiences that certainly both the Pauls have with regard to implementing NAC solutions, and where really NAC fits into the whole jigsaw of security kinds of technologies and processes. So, but really, this is the rough agenda, looking at the common aspects of security exploits that, in our experiences, as I say, quite a common feature of most of our clients' daily lives, as it were. The impacts of those kind of things in both the organisation and users, and also really where NAC fits into perhaps minimising that risk. There is a Q&A session at the end, so if anyone would like to ask a question, please just use the chat function, and that message will pop up and touch on those at the end. So without further ado, really, let's launch into it. In terms of exploits, these are some examples of, and I guess these are ones that have been quite prevalent in use, and I'm sure we all recognise the names and the stories there. I think perhaps if I were to ask Paul from macmon, perhaps just to give us a bit of an insight into some of these, and Paul here from KT, any comments and thoughts about the stories, anything to take away from those?
Sorry, John, was that aimed at me?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. When we're looking at examples of network security exploits, as the slide title indicates, there are a number of ways where people can infiltrate and get access to sensitive data, maybe to cause some mischief within the environment that you work in. And not all of these can be necessarily prevented by NAC, but it, along with other security suite of products that you may have, can actually guard against or minimize the risk of a determined hacker to be able to get in. The top one on the top there, obviously the top one on the top, good English, is a retailer. Now this was a large one in the US, where, as it quite rightly says, 40 million debit credit card details were compromised. Someone managed to glean that information. Now that particular exploit did not come from externally, so it wasn't a case of somebody firing in through your through your firewalls or whatever. This was a hacker who came in and accessed the network through the HVAC system, because a lot of smart buildings now, they'll have a lot of the control, the lighting, the heating, and which comes under HVAC, and being able, and all of those are now governed within an Ethernet network, and hence someone plugged into a spare port. There was no form of decent security, and that person could get access to a number of what's the word I'm looking for? Well, he got a load of information about people's debit and credit cards, which he could then, if necessary, sell on to third party organisations. So, not all attacks are always going to come from the outside. We've seen a lot recently of banking problems in the UK. Recently, there was a hardware issue with Visa. In the past, we've heard of various other banks and financial institutions which have been attacked, and including companies like TalkTalk, who had all of their their information stolen as well, or the end user details. And these can be done by what's called man in the middle. That's somebody who's conning part of the networking system to say that I'm really this server, I'm really this type of end user, and therefore I can then access all the necessary details that I want. And a lot of infiltration these days can come through ports that are not guarded against or blocked. IoT, which is a great solution for people, but there's no real control over any protocols, and do they come with additional security information that you can utilize? And a lot of the answers to those are no. You've also heard about Wonga, which is quite a well-known one as well, and WannaCry, which is where infected software got onto the network, and then blocked files, and therefore people have to pay a ransom to get out, or they have to go back to a previous backup and lose a lot of information. So there's a lot of ways that people can infiltrate, and also again, the bottom one there, satellite communications, manufacturing, where people are playing around with the amount of ingredients that may be in a drug that can save somebody's life, or if they get access into a hospital and they can start playing around with the oxygen levels. And because everything these days is automated, it does cause a lot of aggravation. And what you have on that slide is a number of examples of different types of exploits that can be used there. It's not always outside, it can be inside, and that's the key message there. Would NAC be able to stop some of those? In a number of those, yes, it would. The top one, yes, you would be able to, because you have control of your network, you have visibility of your network. Can we guard against man-in-the-middle attacks? Yes, we would notice those very, very quickly. Would we be able to? Would we have been able to assist in the WannaCry? Yes, we would have, because again, we would have noticed something on the network. Even if two workmen came in, no disrespect to workmen, came in and plugged in an intelligent vending machine in, so that it's a self-ordering vending machine that tells them when the packet of crisps have run out. They see an empty port, they plug it in. Can you guard against that? Can I walk into a hospital and plug in a very, very small little rogue AP? Probably. And then can I access things there? So, what we're saying is that NAC, with other forms of security, can protect your data. So at the end of the day, how much is it going to cost you if you lose all your data's compromised? So that's really what I've got to say on that particular slide. So
thank you, Paul.
That's all right.
And Paul Charles, just to kind of bring you on this, obviously there are, as we said, there are sort of high profile. And I guess it's always good to have examples there in the news, but obviously that these are newsworthy ones out there. There's lots of other stuff as well.
About the fact that Windows was vulnerable. In fact, it was Linux that was being used as the propagation, because it was unpatched and allowed to join the network, because managers would turn around and say, it's Linux, it doesn't need patching, whereas the Mac solution would ensure that before it was connected, it needed to meet a minimal security policy, and therefore those propagation points would not have been available, as to would have protection of connecting of Windows machines that are missing their AV updates or the Windows updates, essentially.
Yeah, totally 100% agree there. And NAC can actually check the Windows keys as well if necessary. Just to reiterate what you were saying there. Sorry, carry on.
The other one is I've been involved in work before, working with a college up north where they were using converged networks, so literally trying to put everything across the same network, so from building controls to CCTV to printers and all sorts going across the same network, where they need to be able to isolate those as soon as you connect it in. So, as you said, the building controls tend to be quite badly looked after as far as patching, so they can be migrated instantly to a more secure area so that it can't affect the other parts of the network.
Absolutely, totally agree with you on that one. And again, even in a manufacturing environment, a lot of it is unmanaged. It's not visible. If you take a pharmaceutical company, anybody hacking into that can mess around with the ingredients, can do whatever they want. So again, it's really a case of how secure do you want your network to be. I mean, it is very difficult, and you may disagree, but it is very difficult for a determined hacker, or to guard always against a determined hacker. And I think it's reasonable to say that not all hackers are external. I mean, how much did it cost for somebody, just to plug something into a port, behind the desk, or go in, like a cleaner or somebody that's not related to that firm. Or as Paul also mentioned about printers, I can easily walk into a building, look at the back of a printer, I can see the MAC address, and then I can reconfigure my laptop to be that MAC address. But if there's no additional security controls, that gives me access onto that network.
Mm-hmm. Just a question. I don't think any of these examples are obvious, but is there I'm just thinking around IP telephony specifically, the telephony type of environments that people implement, there are lots of opportunities for people to utilize that as a mode of attack onto a network. And I think whilst it's an IP-enabled device and all of that, but it perhaps is maybe even implemented by different people to the people who are actually implementing the rest of the technologies on the network, and maybe sort of under the radar, as it were. Do you see a NAC solution fitting into that kind of environment as well? Is that useful?
Well, yeah, because it's giving you total visibility of what you've got on your network, and a good NAC solution will allow you to put the MAC addresses into groups. So, from a visibility point of view, you would see that these MAC addresses are all VoIP phones, for example, or all of these devices are CCTV cameras, which may be IP based, rather than the old style of having a completely separate wiring system. It could be people who bring in BYOD. They could have their Fitbits. They could have whatever they want to bring in that has a MAC address. You can put into a group, and then you can apply some authentication and some security around those. Now, for example, printers, they're plugged onto the network. A lot of the older style printers don't really have any form of authentication, so they wouldn't go to Active Directory with a username and password, although a lot of printers now have that feature. Likewise with 802.1x for authentication, which is more of a LAN-based authentication. It's quite easy to take MAC addresses, get IP addresses, but creating a visibility by putting them all into one group and maybe doing a footprint check on those devices. So, some of them may have embedded operating systems. Some of them you may turn around and say, well, I expect to have these ports open. And so you can create a group that they all belong into. And it would be the same for the VoIP. It could be the same with the CCTV. It could, even if you had SCADA or something like that, you can organize your network logically to be able to apply security to that, or make it even more difficult for hackers to come in.
Okay, thank you. And this is really, I guess it's a question to both of you, but are there any sort of alternatives to that? Is there actually a suite of other technologies that in combination would have the same outcomes as implementing an NAC solution, or isn't that really something completely different to the other technology? It seems to me that it is, but I'm just wondering if it's something that would perhaps, what I'm thinking is, some people might be listening and thinking, well, actually, I've got X, Y, and Z, and therefore I don't need a NAC solution. Is that true? Is it the case that it's, I guess, a breed apart?
Well, from my perspective, it's another level of security. So NAC, obviously, I mean, I don't want to teach my mother how to suck eggs here, but NAC is network access control. And from macmon's perspective, we're working at layer 2. So we're looking at your infrastructure. So every device coming on the network will have a MAC address. Otherwise, how can data be moved around? So really, that's layer 2. I mean, and within that, you have something called 802.1x, which is a radius authentication method for allowing to effectively switching the port on. So a device will come in, is it known to the system? I'll check the authentication. If that MAC address is equal, then I'll open the port up and that person can then access the network. And then there's another level of security. People will want username and passwords, and that maybe comes from something like Active Directory. And then you have endpoint security, where they may have some antivirus or something along those lines. So, no, the antivirus don't really have NAC. Active Directory, I don't think has NAC. So it's another level of security that you could put in to ensure the people who are coming onto your network are allowed to come onto your network. I mean, if I've hacked your MAC address and I've got hold of your IP address, the only thing then that's really stopping is the upper layer security, like Active Directory. Now, if I get those two pieces of information, can I be stopped? Possibly, because are you guaranteed to have a laptop with the same name, exactly the same keys on it, the same operating system with the same upgrades on it, and the same antivirus version and the same this? If that person is going to get all that information, that's one determined hacker. So you're making life a lot more difficult. Have you got anything else to add on that, Paul?
I just see NAC as being the coordination between all of those other security elements. So AV, yes, has the power to protect the machine, but if you're not enforcing it, so NAC's ensuring that's enforced before it's allowed in the door, so to speak. The coordination of being able to place the machine on the correct part of the network, well, it can manually be done, but this is this does it via policy that's automated and gives you that kind of high level control.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not possible normally.
Yeah, I mean, from one of our existing organisations, I mean, basically what they do is, just to give people on the call a bit of an understanding, is that if a new MAC address comes on to the network, the first thing that NAC will do, because it's how they want it done, is to be put into a quarantine VLAN. That means it can go nowhere. Nothing can be accessed, can't even get to the internet or services. So then an email is sent to the NetSec team. Is this MAC address allowed to be on? Yes. It's then brought on. It will then be allowed onto the network. The other side of that is an automation where it comes into a quarantine VLAN. It then checks its credentials against AD, and if it passes those, it's then moved into the relevant VLAN that user can go on. It's like if somebody comes, and just picking up a point that Paul was mentioning there about AV, if somebody comes onto the network and they are non-compliant, in other words, their AV is not the right version, it's not up to date, then we can automatically put them into a remediation VLAN, which will then maybe just have internet access to allow that user to go out and ensure that they're up to date with the latest software updates. Once they then become compliant, they can then be moved into the relevant VLAN. And that brings us on to a slightly different point, and that is NAC working in conjunction with other solutions out there. So if people are using a different type of antivirus, and it may be an on-prem version which has a database, then we can interface with that database, and then we can make inquiries to see whether they're compliant, non-compliant. If they come in as non-compliant and a virus has been found, when the relevant solution they have cleans the virus, they can then tell us, and then we say, you're now compliant, you can come onto the network.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to the next slide then, I think we've got some I guess some examples of where NAC has been implemented, and just sort of discuss briefly how that kind of came about. I think the first one is Paul macmon. Paul.
Yeah, so basically, Volkswagen, this is not our biggest. There is another one, which we're not, because of under strict NDA, we're not allowed to mention, but that particular installation has, we're keeping an eye on 2.5 million endpoints. But Volkswagen use NAC throughout their manufacturing network because we gave them visibility of their devices, and of course, within manufacturing, you have a lot of robotic arms who are doing precision work, and if any of those were to be hacked, then obviously dimensions could be changed, or a piece of software or a virus could be added to the engine management system or whatever. So within that, I think it's like about 250,000 endpoints around the world is all being monitored by macmon. So if any device comes on the network that they don't know about, it's automatically blocked or banned, and providing them with a secure environment for the manufacturing plant. And in its simplistic terms, that's really about it. And out of all the solutions they chose, they went for macmon because it was simple to deploy and simple to configure, and a lot of the processes were all automated without too much effort, and it fitted in with where they wanted to go.
Thank you. And then the NHS one, is that?
Yeah, that's me again. Sorry, I seem to be taking over this presentation. It's not my desire, but with this particular one, this is a National Health Trust in the Southwest, and they were looking at providing NAC for control and visibility of their network. I think from what I remember, there's about 10,000 devices on the network, and the main criteria is to offer basic NAC. In other words, are they allowed on? Are they not allowed on? Can we automate some of the process? Yes. Can we build policies? Yes. Interestingly enough, with this particular installation, their policy were to have no Apple devices on the network. Okay, because that was the policy set by the NetSec team and the chief security officer. When they then did the learning about what they got on the network, they found that on their network they had about 20 to 30 Apple devices. So again, going back to the visibility thing, it showed them what was on their network. Then they could then say these devices are not allowed. One of the other key areas, because it was a trust, it was a number of different hospitals in the Southwest. Obviously, doctors and people move around between sites, and it was very, very key to them that the devices that people were hand carrying were able to be picked up on whatever network and authenticated. And the joy with this our implementation of Mac, it makes no difference whether you're wired or wireless. So yes, those are the main reasons, and they chose it because of its ease of use, because of its speed and setup, because of speed and learning, and being able to make decisions very quickly, and a very, very good dashboard to give them a lot of stats and reports, which is what organisations need this particular time. So that's my two examples. Yeah.
And Paul Jones.
Okay, so Middlesbrough College, that was a greenfield site. It was 4 colleges in Middlesbrough being converged into one big college with about 17,500 students and 800 staff. And they were looking to roll out their network, the converged network, so that everything ran across that network, but they needed to keep things separate, but automate that kind of process. So CCTV was running on its own VLANs and stuff, and cameras would get moved into the right VLANs. Same with the building controls, the door locks, the same printers. They required like a build network, so a machine would be attached to a network it would be quarantined, like Paul said before, and it would go through the build process, and once it met a certain level, it would then be moved into a production VLAN. There's also a requirement that all the computers could be logged on either by a teacher or a student, and depending on their credentials, which part of the network they ended up on and what they could access. So it's really about utilising their core network infrastructure for a load of disparate things that needed their own kind of level of security, and that's what they wanted NAC to do, and that's what it delivered.
Thank you. Interesting. So I'm on the next slide. So I guess this is some of the things that I guess we've been talking about throughout this, but these are, I guess, the points that that come to mind when thinking about implementing NAC and obviously minimising vulnerabilities. Is there perhaps a couple of things just to pick out on there that perhaps worthy of a bit more of a detailed chat? I know we talked about BYOD and IoT. I guess as a thing that's going to impact perhaps most corporate environments these days, isn't it? The whole concept of bringing your own Alexa into work type of thing and whatever. I know you touched on it before, but Paul from macmon, is there anything else to say on that one?
Well, no. I mean, I think at the moment that's probably going to be one of the biggest threats that people are going to have, or organisations are going to have, is when, I mean, if I come into the office, I've got my work phone, I've got my laptop, I've got my private phone, and if I know the Wi-Fi password, then I can get access to whatever services are available. And IoT, security for IoT is going to be key in the future. I mean, I was at a trade show recently, and a couple of my colleagues went to see one of the presentations, and there was a guy who actually switched on somebody's internet-ready kettle, from Manchester. Now, having all the internet-ready things, toothbrushes, kettles, and what have you, is great, but can they provide security? So if I keep switching on that kettle, at some point it's going to run out of water, and then at some point it's then going to start causing problems. So that needs a little bit more investigation, how you can protect yourself against that. Do you have policies, i.e. written policies about people bringing their private stuff into work? It was great for schools and colleges and BYOD and things like that, but maybe a little bit of a rethink is needed, or maybe additional levels of security. I think visualization of an entire network is key. If you don't know what's on your network, how can you manage it? And I agree with Paul, that you're going to put things into specific VLANs or specific areas of the network, because although they may be on the same physical infrastructure, they need to be logically separated. That's an important part. Central administration is actually quite key. And another one there that I think is legacy systems. What legacy systems you've got? I mentioned it before, printers. You're now getting smart printers, but if you've still got some old printers there, are they a security threat? And securing and segmenting endpoint connections. If a network comes in, it's non-compliant, what am I going to do about it? If an endpoint comes in, can I check that it's up to date, and whether it's done WSUS and it's got all the relevant keys that I need? Those are important. And the one, again, and I'll let Paul jump in if he wants to speak any more about these, is working with third parties on this, getting that kind of collaboration going, where you may have a third party solution or additional solution. Can they interact with each other, or are you having a person specializing in this and specializing in that? I don't want to mention a lot of third party applications, but as an example, some people may have an IPAM or IP address management system, because that's what they desired and that's what they have. So can the NAC also integrate with that? Can we integrate with antivirus? Do we have connectors there that allow us to deal with companies like Sophos, Kaspersky, just to use them as a couple of examples? providing a good barrier for people trying to come into your network. Automation of VLAN management is again key. Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's covered.
So the title, the slide name is actually right. It's minimizing vulnerabilities. A determined hacker will try and get in any way he can, or they can. Let's not be specific. But you'll make, by providing different levels of security, starting at your infrastructure. Because if you're building a house, you wouldn't build a house with 4 twigs in the corner, would you? You would have a solid foundation. So at layer 2 in your network infrastructure, you've got a solid foundation, then that's something to build on.
Okay, thank you for that. So on to questions. So we have little time, so I'll just pick one question. Here we go. We've got one here from Steve P. Asking about integration of NAC with Active Directory and 802.1x. I know you kind of mentioned that earlier. Steve wanting just a little more clarity on that.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, a lot of organizations these days, will have, if they're a Windows house, will probably have Active Directory. And what macmon does is the macmon appliance will have a login to the AD, and then of course you can then use the Active Directory as what we call an identity source. So if somebody's coming into a network and they've gone through the level 2 stuff at this moment without 802.1x, we would notice it, and then we would cross-reference it against AD. And if it passed its credentials, whether it be username and password or computer name, and it passed those credentials, we would then let it onto the network. If you then throw in the switch-based security, which is 802.1x, which obviously uses radius, the difference there is that a device comes on the network, the switch will then send that off to an authenticator. Do we know is this guy passing the radius test? Yes, it is. We'll then allow him onto the network. So if you use 802.1x, NAC can work with that. If you use AD, NAC can work, or macmon can work with that. If you use both, the same rules apply. Some people will use both levels of security, and with macmon and the NAC solution that we've been talking about, either or will work within that environment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, kind of brings us to a close now. So clearly, we'd be happy to speak with anyone on this topic. So there's some contact details there, and I think I found that really interesting, very useful. I think we've coined another phrase as well today, which is BYOK, bring your own kettle. To work, some don't do that. We might get hacked. But aside from that, thank you very much to Paul and Paul, and hope you found it interesting, and have a good day.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.